certain many more people go through much more challenging times. But there were still some challenges for us, and I did still learn from the experience. So I hope this can be helpful for you all. So during this time, I was reading Mark, and I was really inspired by Jesus feeding the 5,000. You know, Jesus obviously faced many obstacles in his lifetime. He had family dramas. His mom thought he was crazy at one point. His friends were leaving him, turning their backs on him. His ministry was shrinking. You know, the Pharisees publicly criticized him, and ultimately going to the cross and suffering that came with that. And even right before the feeding of the 5,000, as many of us know, his cousin and his close friend, John the Baptist, is unjustly killed. So he has to deal with this death, this unfair death of a close friend. And yet through all of these challenges, Jesus continued to serve, to preach, and love others deeply. And it's interesting to think about the lesson title because this word balance is in the NIV, and it's only in the Bible 4 times, and it's only in the Old Testament, and it's all referring to weights and scales. So when you think about the idea of balance in Jesus's life, it's hard to find any, because more so what we see is this call to seek first the kingdom. And so, of course, we need to do a great job with raising our families, you know, managing work and home life. And of course, we all understand that. But I also think we have to be careful not to overuse and abuse this idea of a balanced life. Because if you're a disciple of Jesus, in some sense, your life should be out of balance, weighted towards this wholehearted following Jesus. So let's really see what we can learn from Jesus's example. We'll read Mark 6:30-44. And I'll start in verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. By this time, it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. "This is a remote place," they said, "and it's already very late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "That would take more than a half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? How many loaves do you have?" he asked. "Go and see." When they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus told them to make all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven. He gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. So I have 3 points from the text tonight, or whatever time it is for you. And the first point is the mission never stops. Like I said earlier, this was not an easy day for Jesus. He just found out, that his close friend was killed in a brutal way, in a completely unfair and unjust way. And now he's just looking for a chance to rest, to have a bit of a break, which I'm sure he really needed. But instead, he focuses on what's most important, which is the people around him, the thousands gathered, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus was always focused on seeking and saving the lost. That's why he came. And he says that very clearly in Luke 19, verse 10, "For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." And this has to be our mission as well. This has to be our focus, to seek and save the lost. Even when there's challenging times and hard days and we just need a break, there are still people that need saving. We need to be called higher by Jesus' example. One of the major temptations we face when there's any sort of suffering is that it can become all-consuming. It's the only thing we can think about. It's the only thing we can talk about. And for me, for example, when everything first started happening in the world with COVID-19 and we were sick and we had this virus that was spreading around the world, it felt a bit crazy. And then more and more people were getting the virus in the church. We ended up having 20 total cases in the church. And so it was easy to worry about like who has the virus, who could have had it, where did it all start? And then our church was on the news, which is not really what you want to be on the news for. And then some people were posting negative comments on our Facebook page. And then there was this reporter who was calling my husband and wanting him to do like videos of his experience with having the virus, and we didn't do that. But it was just starting to get a little bit crazy and consuming, and it was easy to feel heavy about it and get caught up in that. And it was easy to feel stuck and get inward focus. And there was definitely moments where I felt that, where I felt consumed. But then I had to get back focused on the one thing that matters, and that's the mission. Thinking about, who can study the Bible, who can I reach out to, and for the women in my ministry, who can they reach out to? And this helped me so much to get out of that headspace and back to what was most important, which is seeking and saving the lost. And you may be going through a hard time, and I don't want to minimize our suffering or demean the things that you're going through, but rather just to put an eternal perspective on it, that there are lost souls out there, people who need saving. And even if you've had, your hardest day as a disciple, you're still, ultimately, you're saved. And there's people out there in your cities, in your neighborhoods who need God. And there's one example of this in our church in Sydney, and her name is Yam Anderson. There she is. She is a mom of 2 teenage boys, and about 3 years ago, she was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And she was initially given just 6 months to live. But now, like I said, it's been 3 years since that diagnosis. And she's still battling with this horrible disease, but she is just an amazingly faithful woman. And she's a hero of mine. And despite her hardship and her suffering, she still has so much joy. And she wants everyone to know about Jesus. She shares her faith all the time. And even during COVID-19, she especially has to be at home. But she's having studies over Zoom with her family members, with her friends, her coworkers. And there's always someone she's reaching out to and always thinking of the needs of others. And her example inspires me because it teaches me that through our hardship and challenges, we still have a mission and we still have a purpose from God. Even through hard times, God wants to use us. But there are things that can get in the way of this. We can get that tunnel vision, like I talked a bit about earlier, where we just get caught up in our own world and focused on our pain and suffering. And again, not to discount those things, but there is a world outside that tunnel, a world that needs saving. And what an incredible light we can be, especially during times of hardship and suffering. Jesus really seized the opportunity here. That wasn't his plan for the day, but the opportunity popped up and he seized it. He took the opportunity to love the crowds, to train the apostles. One of the blessings with this virus going around is that people are even more available than usual. And that's an opportunity. One friend I've been studying with recently, Jane, I think she's on here, and it's been really encouraging studying the Bible with her because she's been coming to church on and off for 3 years now, but we've never really been able to consistently study the Bible. She has a beautiful daughter, and her daughter has special needs, so it's been harder to consistently study. But because of all this, we've been able to study over the phone, and we've been able to do it consistently. And so it's so encouraging to see how much she's changed, and even through the obstacles, this heart to seek after God. And I think, when we get inwardly focused, we can miss opportunities like this. Another thing that can hold us back from just being outward focused and mission focused is we become inflexible. In the passage, Jesus and his disciples, again, they were going to get rest and the crowds came, but Jesus changed his plans. Jesus was flexible. And I know this can be difficult for me with a mom of 2 young boys. A lot of times I can feel stressed by, okay, they need this, they need that. And there's constant information kind of being thrown at us all the time of your kid needs to eat this and they need to sleep this much and they can't sleep too much or they need to sleep enough. I don't know. There's all these things going around about what we need to do for our children. And I think sometimes I can get in this mindset and I can get stressed out by those things, and it can prevent me from being flexible. And of course, we need to care for our kids. But I think sometimes they can become too precious, and then that keeps us from really seeking the kingdom first. And like I said before, I can get that way, but I've really learned to push against that and having to make decisions out of faith and not fear. So, okay, if my son watches more TV than usual because I've had a Bible study, it's going to be okay. His brain is not going to fry. He'll be fine. And I just breathe in, breathe out, and make a decision in faith. Amen. Disciples need to be made, and seeking the kingdom first. But we all have to do that. We all have to make these faithful decisions to serve God and the kingdom. And we have to be flexible to save souls. So let's remember the one thing that matters. We all face challenges and hard times, but we cannot lose focus on the lost souls all around us because Jesus never lost focus on us. And my second point is be the dream team. Like I said earlier, the plans have changed and they were originally going to rest, but then the people show up. And Jesus still could have, sent his disciples away to rest. He could have been like, okay, I'll take it from here. You guys go relax. But he doesn't do that. They all stay together and they come up with a plan B. Jesus does the impossible, but he includes the disciples. And it's interesting because Jesus multiplies the food out of thin air. So he could have easily distributed the food all himself. The distribution would have been no problem, especially compared to making food out of nothing. And it would have been more efficient just for him to do it. But he doesn't do that. He includes the disciples in the process. And I think we need to do the same. In verse 39, it says, "Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all." So in our ministries, we need to do the same. We need to be these team players, to involve our women, to work together with them, to help other women in our Bible talks have victories. Jesus is God. He has all power and authority, yet he chooses to work with his disciples. He is a team player. We need to do the same in our churches. What keeps us from being these team players? I think one thing is we think we know best on our own. And that's what the disciples thought. In verses 35 to 36, it says, "By this time, it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. 'This is a remote place,' they said, 'and it's already very late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat.'" They saw the problem and they formulated their own plan and they told Jesus, this is what they're going to do. which is a bit funny in hindsight. It's never a good idea to tell Jesus what to do. But I think we can do the exact same thing. We think we know best for ourselves, for other people, and we know what kind of people we want to work with and how things should be done. So we tell Jesus what we think is best instead of just humbly asking, what do you think is best? And I think this can hold us back. And I think something else that can hold us back from being team players is we think other people might mess it up if we let them do it. And so the disciples, are basically known in the Gospels for being knuckleheads, for messing up, for not being faithful, for not believing Jesus can do much. So if anyone was going to mess this up, it was going to be them. But Jesus entrusts them and he works with them. And that's amazing. And so why do you think we should not entrust other people? We've really got to have that same heart. My husband and I have been watching this Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. And this isn't, I guess, the most feminine analogy, but women like sports too, so it's okay. But one of the things they talk about is how Michael Jordan was the best singular player in the world, but he still couldn't win a championship. It was only when he learned to be a great teammate, when he learned to make the people around him great, that they really started winning. And this all happened when they got a new coach, Phil Jackson. And he urged Michael Jordan to adopt a new system in the team, a much more team-oriented system. And he said something to Michael like, I know you're great, but you need to learn how to make everyone around you great. And I believe that has application for us today, to entrust those around us, even if they're not as well trained, even if they're going to make mistakes, to work with them, to build a great team. That's how we've all learned, isn't it? By making mistakes. I'm so grateful for the staff here in Sydney and for the leadership of Mike and Tess Fontenot. When we were first starting off in the ministry, we weren't in the ministry for long, and we started leading a region, and we were definitely underqualified for sure. And my time in the ministry has been a lot like that, put in responsibilities or positions that I feel like I'm not really ready for this. And sometimes I didn't really like it, but I'm grateful that for Mike and Tess, that they entrusted us, that they had faith in God, that he can use anyone. And I'm really grateful for those relationships we have on staff that call us higher and that stretch us for God. And we really need one another. We really need these relationships during hard times, people that will stretch us. We need these great relationships. If you're feeling low in your faith, find a partner who can spur you on, who can give you a faith boost. Who is someone that you can partner with and do something together for God. God will use us as we work together. I was really encouraged by a sister here, Susan Bosenket. We were able to spend some time recently because some of the restrictions have been raised here. And she was like, let's do something radical for God. And so then we decided to go cold contact share with some women, which felt like pretty radical during this time since everyone's social distancing and everyone's a bit standoffish. But it was encouraging for my faith to do that, after not having done it in a while because of the virus and being stuck inside. I really needed that. And I think we really need each other to spur each other on to do things for God. So let's remember to be these women who are team players and building that in our ministry, seeing that we need each other. And my final point is God does the impossible. So we see here that the crowds are hungry and they have no food to eat, and the disciples see an obstacle. There's no way that we can feed these people. The little food they do have is no use at all. How could this work? This is impossible. But Jesus sees something totally different. He doesn't just see the obstacles, and he knows what our God does to obstacles, that he destroys them. And he knows that it's nothing to him. So he breaks them into groups, prays, and the food is multiplied, and God does the impossible. And I think we can often be just like the disciples here. We see an obstacle and we think, oh, this is not going to work. What I have is no use at all. We only have 2 fish and 5 loaves. How could this work? This is impossible. And particularly right now, during this strange time, I think it's very easy to feel that way. You know, how could anyone new start studying the Bible? How are we supposed to meet more people? How will the church grow? And we can get faithless, just really focusing on the obstacles, viewing things from a human perspective, and forget that our God specializes in the impossible. God loves these impossible situations because they show his power all the more. And yeah, right now we're in the midst of an impossible situation. You know, the world is in turmoil. There's uncertainty and fear all around, but good, because this is where God likes to work. This is where he wants to use us. And God is so much bigger than this pandemic. People are still seeking him. He will find a way for them to know the truth. Jesus is not stopped by barriers. And part of the problem for the disciples is they forget who's with them. Jesus is right there. But like I said earlier, they make their own plan of action. You know, at this point, the disciples had seen Jesus drive out demons, raise a dead girl, heal the sick, calm storms, literally control nature. And they still ask, how will we get enough food? And I think, you know, we can think, come on, guys, get it together. But we're the exact same way. We've all seen God do amazing things. We've seen amazing turnaround stories. We've seen God do impossible things in our lives and the lives of others. Yet when we've had a hard day or a discouraging Bible study, we can just think, oh, this person will never change. I'm stuck in this situation. But we have to remind ourselves of who our God is. Like it says in Jeremiah 32:17, I am the Lord, the God of all mankind. Is anything too hard for me? This verse doesn't give an answer directly, but it's obvious. Nothing is too hard for God. And I love this verse. It pumps me up because this is who our God is. Absolutely nothing is too hard for him. With God, all things are possible. It's been so encouraging to see God working during this time in Sydney. It's really shown me that even when we feel limited, God is always working. Nothing is too hard for him, that it's so not about us because we've been trapped at home and it's all about God. There have been 17 people baptized in Sydney since the pandemic began in early March. And some more on the way, some more people getting baptized even this next week. It's just been so encouraging seeing God work. And also, there's so many women in Sydney who are studying the Bible with their moms right now. One sister, Tiana, from our professionals ministry, started studying the Bible with her mom. And her mom lives in North Queensland, which for context, it's about 15 hours from the closest church. And Tiana could have thought, what's the point of studying the Bible with my mom, like when she lives so far away? Or she could have thought, I've been trying for years already. What's the difference to ask her now? But instead, she asked the question, do you want to study the Bible? And now her mom is getting baptized tomorrow, which is so encouraging. And Tiana was able to drive all the way up to North Queensland, which took about 4 days. And so now she'll go, baptize her mom tomorrow. So it's just so encouraging to see God work in these impossible situations. And he loves working in these situations. And all this good news is not because of us. Clearly, we feel limited. We're more stuck at home. Some of the people are just coming out of the woodwork, and it's all about God. And you think, God can't grow your church during a global pandemic? You think God can't pull you out of that difficult situation? You think God can't change hearts and minds? We can get so faithless, but we need to remember that the distances, the obstacles, this pandemic, nothing can stop God. What is something in your life right now that can feel like an impossible situation? Now, if you believed it with all your heart that God does the impossible, what would you do in that situation? Write it down and do it this week. Share it with a friend so they can help hold you accountable. Let's be encouraged that God can do the impossible. There's nothing that is too hard for him, and let's keep working. To conclude everything, let's be women who, even during hard times, love and care for the lost world around us, who are in this together, working as a team, and let's be called higher that nothing is impossible for God. Thanks for letting me share.